Hey guys, I want to do a video today and look at this transitional time between the Millennial Kingdom and Satan's little season. How did this all go down? What were the last 100 years or so like of the Millennial Kingdom? Were there actually people who were tired of living under the rod of iron and looked for liberty from God? And how over just a few generations did people get so blinded to knowing that there was a millennial kingdom in their not too distant past? And ultimately, how will people be so deceived during Satan's little season, whose number is the sand of the sea that surrounds the camp of the saints and the beloved city, to make war with God? How did this all go down? How did this last 150 years of the millennial kingdom? What was going on at that time? And how did Satan's little season, how was it initiated, and how did it expand during these first few decades of it until what we see today? Well, let's continue to look at this, and I want to read Ecclesiastes 1:9 through 11 and keep these verses in mind when we look at this study. It reads, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It has been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after." So with this, let's discuss this date of 1776. And like I've said in my other videos, I think this is a great starting point to begin this conversation on little season eschatology, but I'm not dogmatic about it. And as you'll see in this video, it may not have been 1776 when Satan was loosed from the bottomless pit. It may have been after, but there are significant things that went down during this time, such as the Illuminati beginning. And you can see Adam Weishaupt, Bavarian Illuminati originator and the Great Seal of the United States, with the pyramid, the all-seeing eye, Novus Ordo Seclorum, and Annuit Coeptus. What does this all mean? Why is that on the United States of America dollar bill? We're going to talk about that. Also, during this time, there were secret societies who were beginning to come out and make their voice known. Mysteries of the Freemasons of America. And we're going to talk about that. Eleusis. Freemasons started their own dating system in 1776. And it was in direct opposition to Anno Domini, Year of the Lord. And they transitioned to Eleusis, the Year of Light. And the Declaration of Independence. This was signed in 1776, and several were Freemasons. What was this contract all about? Who was it actually made to get free? And the people that signed it, who were they looking to get liberty from? Well, we read in our history books that the Declaration of Independence primary author was Thomas Jefferson, who was a Freemason, and he used the ideas of John Locke, especially the social contract theory, to argue for their independence. And the purpose of the Declaration of Independence was to state and explain the reasons for separation from the British king. But truly, what king did these Freemasons and these people in rebellion within the secret societies at the end of the little season, who did they want to be free from? We'll continue. The Declaration of Independence traces back to several philosophies. Again, John Locke, the natural rights, believed people were born with certain natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and the social contract theory. And within the social contract theory, there was stipulations that people could overthrow a government if they thought that it did not uphold its end of the contract. So keep that in mind. The Age of Enlightenment was going on prior to the signing of Declaration of Independence, and it actually continued up until 1815. But it began in the late 17th century, and it was ideas that were becoming more and more prominent to lead to a revolution. And key thinkers of the Enlightenment, like Rousseau and John Locke, who we just saw with the social contract theory, Voltaire, who was a very big advocate on the separation of church and state. What were their true intentions during this Enlightenment period? We have Freemasons within America, like Patrick Henry, who stated prior to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." And the Declaration of Independence ultimately was for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what type of life were they wanting to live? And the liberty that they were seeking, who are they seeking freedom from? And the pursuit of happiness. It says in the Bible, "Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God. And happy is he that findeth wisdom, and a man that getteth understanding." But the pursuit of happiness with these Freemasons in these secret society was just the opposite. They wanted to be free from God. That was the libertas that they were looking for. And this contract, this Declaration of Independence, is very important. And I believe it was not only an earthly agreement, but it was also a spiritual agreement. We had the colonies join or die, join the snake together, that's broken into 13 parts. They say it's the colonies, but we know there's other things that had 13, including prominent families at that time that were part of the elite, that were part of this contract, that they were going to want people to either join or die. You can see the Massachusetts Sun in 1775, join or die, and you can see the serpent and dragon symbology. "Do thou, great liberty, inspire our souls and make our lives in thy possession happy, or our death glorious in thy just defense." This is the libertas, the liberty that these rebellious people during the Age of Enlightenment, at the end, the last century or so of the Millennial Kingdom, who are tired of being under God's rule and the glorified saints, and they were seeking their own life, their own liberty, and their own pursuit of happiness. And they were seeking another small g God who was soon to be loosed from the bottomless pit and promised them those things. Free since 1776. And this began a revolution. And these revolutions were all over the world during this time. In the United States, it was led by the first president, George Washington, a Freemason. And during the American Revolution, there were cities after cities that were burned to the ground, old world buildings and the information within it completely destroyed. And that was one of the main objectives of this revolution. You can see here, again, this is New Orleans, city after city burned during this time. The Great Fire of New York in 1776. And this Annua Coeptis by the Illuminati, who was formed at that time, the same year as the Declaration of Independence, as the same year when they declared an age of light. We have a new world order being established. And this transition would lead to the loosing of their small g god, Lucifer, from the bottomless pit to lead them in this new world order. Annuit coeptus. What does that mean? And how is it important? Why is it on our seal? Annuit coeptus means he, meaning God, has favored our undertakings, or he has approved our undertakings. And again, this is very important language. This new world order by the rebellious faction within the last part of the Millennial Kingdom made a social contract, made an agreement to be free from rule of the previous kingdom. And God actually allowed them to do this. He approved their undertakings. This occurred in the United States of America. And that brings me to the word America. What does America mean? Well, if you look up Americus in Latin, it means a powerful ruler, also house ruler. What does house ruler mean? Well, it stems from a government term of home rule, where a government of a colony, dependent country or region by its own citizens. So a government of a colony or dependent country or region by its own citizens. So basically, this is a government set up by the people, and it is ultimately under rule from a lower authority. And if you look at house rule, what it means, it truly means that a higher authority is given a lower authority some autonomy to rule part of the land of the higher authorities if certain conditions are met. And I think this is exactly what happened. The Declaration of Independence was not only an earthly contract, but it was a spiritual contract, and it was a contract that God approved their undertakings. And Lucifer, Satan, at the end of the 1,000-year millennial kingdom, was loosed to lead this rebellious people in the New World Order. And it reminds me of the book of Job, where again, God allows Satan to have some autonomy and authority over his creation if certain conditions are met, such as Job 1:12. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And then in Job 2:6, the Lord said to Satan, Behold, he is in your hand, but save his life. So again, a higher authority was given a lower authority, some autonomy and some power over his creation if certain conditions are met. And I think this is exactly what happened during this transitional time in and around 1776. The loosing of Satan from the bottomless pit. This was a real event, and it's in our not too distant past. Gog and Magog. And if this contract, this Declaration of Independence, was presented and ultimately signed by the United States of America, of the United States of the home ruler, the powerful ruler, Gog and Magog being the land of Gog, then I think we can safely assume that the Statue of Liberties that we see all over the world, and the largest one in New York Harbor, signifies exactly this agreement and what happened as the result of it. Lucifer, Libertas, the Luciferians, their small g god was loosed from the bottomless pit during the 19th century, I believe. And I'm going to show you how I think it happened. Again, starting with this Declaration of Independence that the people, the rebellious people, brought to the Lord. You can see Lucifer with the chain being broken from his feet after being bound for 1,000 years in the bottomless pit, the liberty, the flame, and the year 1776. But when did Satan actually get loosed? If it wasn't 1776 and this was just the agreement of him being loose and for the people at the end of the Millennial Kingdom to have freedom from God and acquire their own pursuit of happiness, when did it occur? When was the birth of America? The birth of Americas, the home ruler, the powerful ruler, when did he arise and ascend from the bottomless pit? Well, I want to take you to 40 years later, one generation later, after the Declaration of Independence was signed, and we have the year without summer of 1816. And the supervolcano Tambora, the largest volcano in the history of recorded world, occurred in Indonesia and led to ash that distributed all over the world, causing climate changes and effects to cool the broad plane of the earth to the point where it was much colder. There were cataclysmic events that occurred as a result in and around it, and there was literally not sun seen for an entire summer, sometimes up to a year. In Book of Life 144, he recently proposed this as a possible link to mud floods, and he does a lot of good work on his channel looking at this. So definitely check out his channel on Mount Tambora, and I'll link that video so you can get to his channel in the future. But during this time period, not only was the American Revolution going on, but you also had the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. You had the Napoleonic Wars that began in the early 1800s, again, ending in 1815. And Napoleon, a Freemason, in the East was doing the same thing that George Washington was doing in the West. He was leading armies throughout Europe and Asia and burning down old world buildings and evidence of the past millennial kingdom. And whoever got in their way were killed. You can see here the symbology of libertas of the French Revolution. And during the same time, you had a 3-year war in the United States, the War of 1812, that ended again in 1815. And during the War of 1812, you had 3 years of the same revolutionary destruction that were happened previously in the American and the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars and all the other worlds all over the world. Basically, this New World Order was being established after this contract was approved, that God approved their undertakings for this New World Order, and this was the transition at the end of the Millennial Kingdom before Satan was loosed. We see the United States version of Libertas, not only in the Statue of Liberty, Lady Liberty, who's not a lady, but you see it in Colombia, the goddess of liberty. And we see it in Hollywood. The New Madrid earthquakes of 1811 and 1812, the largest earthquakes in the United States, also were occurring during this time of revolutionary wars, at the times of this upheaval during this generation after this Declaration of Independence was signed. And you can see the New Madrid earthquakes here caused significant soil liquefaction and flooding. And this is artist renditions of things that were occurring during this time in the early 1800s. So during this transitional time between the end of the Millennial Kingdom and the beginning of Satan's little season, there were a lot of revolutionary wars. There was upheavals of complete nations. There were cataclysmic events such as earthquakes, flooding, possible mud flooding that went well into the mid 1800s. And all of these events led to a generation forgetting their past. It was destroyed, it was burned. Those who had a memory of it began in the 1800s to be put in insane asylums. They began to have families disrupted and their children placed in orphanages, to be indoctrinated on the New World Order. Now I want to look at 1 Samuel 8, and I want to show you a parallel in the Bible of how I think this social contract, the Declaration of Independence, leading to the loosing of Satan, began. And let's go to the first verse of 1 Samuel 8. And it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together, and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel, when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. And so in the same way, I think that the, quote, British king, unquote, that the Freemasons of America, the secret societies, were trying to gain their freedom from, were truly trying to gain their freedom from the Millennial Kingdom and the rule of Jesus Christ and his saints. And it continues, and I'm going to show you how when the children of Israel were given King Saul, who's a parallel in this to Gog, what occurred, what they were getting in return. They thought they wanted liberty from God, but this is what they got. In verse 8, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. And you can think about this in the same standpoint from the initiation of the Millennial Kingdom and the generations that were within the Millennial Kingdom. After several hundred years, those distant generations from the beginning began to rebel and seek other gods. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto thee, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. So this is Samuel speaking to the children of Israel about what this king is going to ultimately give them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He shall take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And this began after the loosing of Satan in the United States. We see this with the Civil War, leading into world wars. This not only affected the United States, obviously. Satan's little season has affected the entire world and has led to World War won the great war and will continue. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50, and he will set them to ear his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his instruments of war and instruments of chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries and to be cooks and to be bakers, as we see here with the wartime recipes. Sow the seeds of victory, plant and raise your own vegetables. And you can see here the Phrygian hat there on what does not look like the body habitus of a slender female. But continue, and he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And continuing with the wars, the women at war, and taking land. Here's the federal land ownership by U.S. state. The entire West is owned by the federal government, just about. Why is that? Verse 16, and he will take your men servants and your maid servants and your goodliest young men and your asses and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. He will tax you, and that occurred in the United States in the earliest 20th century with Woodrow Wilson. He will take your children, child labor, the Industrial Revolution. This is what was going on after the initiation of Satan's little season in the decades following. Child labor in America. Again, all of this was because of this contract that was signed, this declaration of independence from God that the people at that time made towards the end of the Millennial Kingdom and the beginning of Satan's little season. This is Gog. This is Lucifer, the Statue of Liberty. This is who the Statue of Liberty is in homage of Satan, who is loose as we speak, and is, I believe, in Magog, America. He's Americus. He is the house ruler of this world today. He's the home ruler, the powerful ruler that was given authority under certain conditions during this time. And the conditions are deception. So us as believers during this little season, I think James 5:11 is a good verse, and go back to Job, who was afflicted by Satan with certain conditions by God. And I think his creation now is being afflicted by this lower authority who God has given some autonomy during this little season prior to his demise and ultimately destruction in the lake of fire. But in James 5:11 it says, behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. So we know that God is very gracious, very merciful. And we know the end of what is going to occur. Patience of the saints that we see over and over in the book of Revelation is just as relevant during the little season as it was during the time of tribulation prior to his second coming. And this is interesting. A George W. Bush quote: Gog and Magog are at work in the Middle East. The biblical prophecies are being fulfilled. This confrontation is willed by God, who wants to use this conflict to erase his people's enemy before a new age begins. Now, whose side is he on? And what God is he truly speaking of? But in our eyes as believers in Jesus Christ, we know that God is using this conflict, this Satan's little season, ultimately for his glory, to show his strength and power and the faithfulness of the saints who will be with him at the end of the little season, when this new age begins. It's going to be a new heaven and new earth as Jesus descends from New Jerusalem. And believers at that time will receive their glorified body in a glorified state in the eternal kingdom with him. At that time, there will be no more tears. There will be no more death or crying. But this is just a continuation of the home ruler here during the little season, the skull and bones, the secret societies, the secret handshakes. And it leads me to a few verses in Ezekiel 38. And I have comments from time to time. Why isn't anything written about in the Bible about Satan's little season except in Revelation 20? Well, I think there's plenty that is written about this time. Even going back as we looked at in the Old Testament in 1 Samuel 8 is a shadow of this last days, these latter day events that we may experience in our lifetime or our children's lifetime. But in Ezekiel 38, I believe also this is speaking of a near far prophecy where Ezekiel is speaking on the near to the house of Israel being judged and ultimately being destroyed by the Roman Empire and ultimately by the trumpet and vial judgments at the second coming of Jesus Christ. But this also has a far prophecy of the end of the little season. And so let's look at this to close. And it reads in Ezekiel 38:8, after many days, thou shalt be visited. In the latter years, thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword. And this is Ezekiel speaking to Gog. And is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, possibly ascending out of the bottomless pit, Gog, Satan, Lucifer, during Satan's little season. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands and many people with thee. Think about the Declaration of Independence, the social contracts, those that wanted freedom from God to establish a new world order. And then skip into verse 14 and 15. Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog, thus saith the Lord God, in that day when my people of Israel dwell safely, shalt thou not know it? And thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding upon horses, a great company and a mighty army. Again, the north is going to be involved, I believe, the center of our realm, where once Jerusalem resided, and possibly the camp of the saints residing now. And you can see the nations that surround it. And you can see why there's, in particular, a heavy interest in Greenland right now. Because possibly the camp of the saints is still there. And possibly Ezekiel even tells us this, with New Jerusalem above us and the aurora borealis, which are colors of the throne of God. They are also colors of the foundation of New Jerusalem. Is New Jerusalem's foundation and its precious stones emanating light at the north above the camp of the saints? And that's what we see in the aurora borealis. But continuing, Ezekiel 38:16, and thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land. It shall be in the latter days. Again, this is speaking, in my opinion, of the end of the little season. And I will bring thee against my land, that the heathen may know me, when I shall be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before their eyes. Thus saith the Lord God, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants, the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them? So Ezekiel is saying, prophesying to Gog, that in the latter days, Gog would come against the servants and prophets of Israel. In the north parts, are we talking about the camp of the saints here? it's a very good possibility that that's exactly what this far prophecy of Ezekiel 38 is speaking of. In verses 18 and 19, it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face, for in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. And finally, in verses 22 and 23 to end the chapter, and I will plead against him, speaking of Gog, with pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands and upon the many people, possibly as it numbers the sand of the sea, that are with him, and overflowing rain and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. Thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. This is exact parallel of the Gog Magog battle that we see at the end of the little season in Revelation 20, verses 7 through 9. And when the 1,000 years are expired, there's an expiration. Satan shall be loose out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, the spiritual entity, Lucifer, Satan, and the country, the nations that he rules, Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. That's the exact parallel. That's Gog. He's in America, in the United States of America, the home ruler, possibly in the District of Columbia, another name for Libertas. So with that, when us as Americans growing up, we talked about being indoctrinated in so many things. We're indoctrinated in giving the pledge allegiance to America, to the flag. I pledge allegiance, and we've been doing this to Americas, the home ruler, without even knowing it. Americas the beautiful. A musical salute to the Statue of Liberty, but this is truly a salute to Gog, to Lucifer, Americas, the home ruler, the beautiful, like Ezekiel 28, when he speaks of Satan in verses 12 and 13. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, the topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. So I will close with that. But again, this social contract, this contract of independence that was signed, I think initiated the loosing of Satan a generation later, possibly in 1816, when there was the year of no summer, after the cataclysmic events, after the Revolutionary Wars, after the earthquakes and the floods, the mud floods began. People's lives were affected during this generation, this transition at the end of the little season. And within a couple more generations, the whole history of the Millennial Kingdom was wiped out, and the deception was well underway. And we are continually being deceived every day. The spiritual deception is unlike anything I think that we can even fathom or wrap our minds around. At the end, there's not going to be great tribulation coming. There's going to be greater and greater deception coming. That is what's ahead. And we've been indoctrinated with everything within Satan's little season with this deception, especially Americans. I mean, we may be right in the middle of where Satan dwells, just like, back in the churches of Revelation. He had a seat. He had a place at Pergamos. You know, this may be the New World Order Pergamos. And, you know, when we celebrate 4th of July and shoot fireworks, truly, what was freed? Whose freedom are we celebrating here? You know, I think truly it's what happened not too long ago in the 1800s. And even the political statements of today, make America great again. Make America, make the home ruler great again. You know, we have to understand that the deception is great in this last time. So that will conclude the study on this transitional time between the Millennial Kingdom and Satan's little season. I hope this kind of opens up our understanding just a little bit more about how this could have taken place. How could so many people be blinded of the historical past, and how can so many people be deceived of what's going to occur in possibly not too distant future? And again, this study, you know, I've been looking at this, looking at parallels in the Bible, and it reminded me of a verse in John 21:25. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. Amen. And, you know, people will come against the Holy Bible, say it's not a science book, say it's not a history book, but it's a book of truth. And the books that should have been written with all the things that Jesus did and all his wisdom and knowledge and understanding, the world can't contain them. But through his Spirit, we can be given this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and the truth of history, the truth of our historical past, and the truth of science, and truly how this world operates. I've learned more from reading the Old Testament and the parallels, such as in 1 Samuel 8, of history and what has most likely happened in our not too distant past within America, as I did in 12 years of high school and college studies in history. Because we know our history books lost, but we know we can trust the Holy Bible, and it is a word of truth, and it will continue, God willing, to give us truth, those who are truly seeking truth in all things. I love this community because that's what this community is built upon. And that one book, the Holy Bible, the supernatural book that gives us ever clearer understanding of truth, is far superior than the libraries of books that we see on history, on science in the world today. Annuit Coeptus, the New World Order. Again, this occurred after the Declaration of Independence was signed. God approved their undertakings of this New World Order. And this all-seeing eye is Lucifer's eye at the top of the throne of God. And I think that this pyramid represents New Jerusalem, the city, the beloved city, which one day will be revealed, and we will see it as the next big thing. If we are indeed Saints' Little Season, the next big event will be the revealing of the camp of the saints and the beloved city. That beloved city, I think, is in the shape of a pyramid. I think that's what it has all gone back to, the pyramids that we see that were probably built in antediluvial days, possibly by titans, possibly by small g gods of the city that they left, New Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem. I think that's the goal now, to get those that have been in rebellion, including the leader, Gog, Satan, Lucifer, who is deceiving this little season. This is their ultimate goal. They put it on the great seal right in plain sight for us. Just like Isaiah 14:12-14, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. But we know the end of the story, that at the end, all the glory will go to God, and it will be our Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, who sits on that throne, and we will be with him in our glorified state in the new heaven and new earth. That's how it all ends. God bless.